We're very pleased to announce our new StarSense Explorer Dobsonians. The telescope tube features a larger aperture than the other StarSense Explorer telescopes. It also has a 2-inch Crayford focuser that accepts both 2-inch and 1 1/4 format eyepieces, and also has a custom pointing knob to help you precisely aim the telescope at your target. Both the tube and base have carry handles at their balance points, and of course, the exciting StarSense Explorer dock. Simply place your smartphone in the dock and launch the app. Choose from the best objects to view, then just move the telescope to follow the arrows to your target. When it's ready to view, the bullseye turns green. It's easy to do because of the patented StarSense technology.
Hi everyone, we hope you'll enjoy the presentations we're bringing to you virtually from the Texas Star Party. We wanted to thank everyone who has taken the time to make this event what it is. TSP is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and it's made possible every year by the help of people just like you. If you like these presentations and would like to help further the Star Party, you can throw a few bucks or a few thousand in our virtual tip jar by donating today. And it's tax deductible too. Make sure to share these videos with your friends, any clubs you're a part of, and most of all, remember to have fun. We hope to see you in person next year.
My name is Joe Caleb. I'm the president of the Houston Astronomical Society. Welcome everybody, and it's my distinct pleasure to introduce tonight's guest, John Talbot. John is a world-renowned astro-imager and pixel site guru from Ocean Springs, Mississippi. John has been attending the Texas Star Party since 2014. John took up the hobby of astrophotography in 2001. We've been at it for a while. And has pursued photographing the night sky for the past 19 years using astronomical CCD and DSLR cameras. John has been using PixInsight since its release in 2004 and has done PixInsight presentations at TSP, NEAIC, Winter Star Party, OpenText, and the Mid-South Star Days, as well as writing a year-long PixInsight series for amateur astronomers. He has had numerous images published in Sky and Telescope, Astronomy, and Amateur Astronomy magazines. He's also done multiple equipment reviews for Astronomy magazine. His most recent article, published in Sky and Telescope, was How to Optimize Imaging for Suburban Locations. John has a backyard observatory in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, and photographs the night sky there and across the country dark sites. Since retirement, he has been active in teaching astrophotography techniques at various star parties across the central and southeast U.S. His images can be viewed at his website, starscapeimaging.com. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Jonathan is the retired chief flight meteorologist for the 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Squadron, better known as the Hurricane Hunters, located in Keesler AFB in Biloxi, Mississippi. He retired in 2016 after 34 years of service. He has over 5,600 flying hours and 153 hurricane penetrations, which provide critical data to the National Hurricane Center in Miami, Florida. John was active in promoting hurricane awareness during many trips to the Caribbean nations. He was the main project manager for the development of the step frequency microwave radiometer, which is an instrument carried on reconnaissance aircraft to remotely measure wind speeds on the ocean surface. So with that, I'd like to introduce tonight's guest, Mr. John Talbot.
Well, good evening. I hope you can hear me okay? Not too loud? Okay. The Britney Spears headset is kind of weird. I can't hear myself, so. Anyways, good evening. I want to thank the Texas Star Party staff for inviting me here to talk to you guys tonight. And how many imagers do we have in the room? Figured we probably have mostly imagers, and I know we have some visual folks. Well, this is basically an imaging talk, but hopefully maybe you'll get into it someday and you'll know about some of this stuff. What I'm going to talk about is basically how to determine how long you need to expose for when you shoot through a telescope. And so you think it's an easy question, but people ask all the time. You know, they do something at home, and they come here where you have a really dark sky. Whoops, I thought I went away. We have a really dark sky here, and it's different. So how do you figure all that out? You know, maybe after you leave here, you go someplace else, and the sky's a little different. So that's what this talk is all about. After this, I've got a presentation that I'm going to go over kind of an extra thing about some interesting, how us amateurs can help professionals. And I've been very, very lucky to work in that area a little bit for the last few years. And then a nice little slideshow at the end to kind of pump you up to go look at something if it clears out. So, anyways, okay, so we'll get going. So how do we typically image? Well, normally, our cameras are collecting photons from the sky, right? And our eyes are collecting photons when we look through a telescope, through an eyepiece. Well, our cameras do the same thing. And the brighter those photons are, or the more of them we have, the brighter our image is. So, if our cameras were perfect, right? So if we had an absolutely perfect camera, and we had a constant string of photons coming down from the sky, we could shoot, say, a single image for like an hour, right? So we took an hour-long exposure and we collected 1,000 photons in our camera. Say that's how it worked. Well, if we shot a 1-minute exposure 60 times for that same hour, we'd still be collecting 1,000 photons. If we shot maybe 6 10-minute exposures, we'd still be getting 1,000 electrons. So, as you can see, you know, would you rather do an hour-long exposure or a 1-minute exposure? Can everybody's telescope track for an hour? Well, the problem also is our cameras aren't perfect, right? Nothing is perfect. Photons don't arrive consistently, they're very random. They're like raindrops. You know, I could be standing here and a raindrop can hit me on the head, and somebody over here gets no raindrop on their head. So they're just not consistent. The electron count, which is photons get turned into electrons by a chip on your phone, the little camera in here, the little camera on a telescope, the camera, maybe you have a webcam at home looking out at something. Those photons that come into that get turned into electrons. And in the end, the quality of our image is really how many photons did we collect that got converted to electrons. And the more of those things we have, the brighter our image is. So, you know, if you use your cell phone outside, take a picture now, it's going to look really good. If you go out after dark, the picture won't look very good, right? They get enough photons in it to act, you know, to really be processed by the electronics. So it's all about photons. So why don't we take an hour exposure? Well, chances are that something is going to ruin that exposure. There's a lot out of our control when our telescope is doing its thing. Maybe a cloud will come over. Maybe something else will happen. So I think it'd be much better maybe if we took maybe 61-minute exposures. If a cloud goes over through one of those, it's not going to mess anything up in the big scheme of things. So there's a lot of stuff out of our control on a really, really long exposure. So what we do as astrophotographers is we take shorter exposures. And it's less likely to get ruined, and it allows us to approach what we could do if we took a single long exposure. So the other problem we have is not every photon gets counted, because these chips, certain chips are more sensitive than other chips. And there's a thing called quantum efficiency. This says, well, how efficient is our chip? If our quantum efficiency is 50%, 50% of those photons are going to be turned into something like electrons that can go into our computer and be counted and be shown as an image. Well, quantum efficiency is a big deal. And that's, there's a whole bunch of different types of sensors out there and different types of cameras. So the quantum efficiency really depends on the actual sensor, and that changes. So that's one problem we have. We also have a problem with noise. Thermal noise and random noise adds electrons like photons do to what we see. We can usually take care of this thing called thermal noise by cooling our cameras, and that's why we have a cooler on astronomical cameras that cool the chips down, because it reduces that significantly. And for the most part, that's easy to take care of. We just turn the cooler on, and we're done, and then we do our stuff. However, there are other sources of noise, and I highlighted the two most important ones. One is read noise, and one is shot noise. And those are bits of random noise that really mess up detail in the image. Read noise is really, how accurate our little converter, what's called an analog to digital converter on the chip, that takes that photon and says, okay, now you're an electron. Some are more accurate than others, and that creates noise. It's camera dependent. And then we have what's called shot noise. Shot noise all depends on what comes out of the sky. So if you're like me and like probably 80% of the other people that live in maybe a suburban area, maybe I've got a below 5 sky, shot noise is not good for us if we're looking through an eyepiece, right? Our eye gets a lot of that shot noise. It's called light pollution. It's everything is dimmed down in the sky. So it's a sky-dependent thing, and it can be taken care of. And I'm going to show you how. Here, shot noise is very, very low because the sky's dark. So those are the types of noise we typically see. And let's take a look at kind of what we use. So there is a little bit of a difference between a CCD and a CMOS camera. A CCD, which is called a charge coupled device, basically works by taking in those photons and then closing the shutter, and then all those photons get read out at one point, and it goes to a converter that converts those into electrons, and then it goes to our computer. Boom! Now we have a picture in front of our face on the screen. They're typically very expensive to produce. And the bigger problem is they're not being produced much anymore. The two big companies that have produced these, Sony and ON Semiconductor, have basically stopped a lot of CCD production. And that's where us amateurs get a lot of our cameras from. So recently, in the past 5 or 10 years, CMOS cameras have become very, very popular. These work a little bit differently. A CMOS camera has one of those little analog to digital converters on every little pixel. So if you have a camera with 10 million pixels, there's 10 million of those little converters on that chip. And that creates a little bit of extra heat, a little bit more problems, but the manufacturers of these chips have figured all that out in the past 3 to 5 years. And now they are very, very good in comparison to CCDs. They are less expensive to make, they use a lot less power. They're in about every device you can think of. CMOS chip in here. Everything you can think of, maybe a car sensor that sees, that you have in your car, home sensors for security systems, they're all CMOS cameras. And CMOS cameras are basically the thing to have right now, because all the money in R&D and development is going into these things. So why has been this huge move? Well, it's basically money. And it's basically because in the CMOS market, the market was valued at about $17 billion in 2020. And if you look at CCDs, it's about $2 billion. Now, there are still CCDs being produced. Some of them are very, very good. They're super expensive. And if you want a $20,000 camera, you can easily get one that has the same performance as a high-end CMOS now. But a CMOS, you can pay $3,000 or $4,000. So, which one would you rather buy? So anyways, we are where we are. We have a lot of CMOS cameras out there now that are very, very good. The way the technology works, over on the left, the original CMOS cameras had the analog to digital converter above where the light-sensitive portion of the chip was. So on top, you see these red, green, blue things. Those are micro lenses that focus the light down onto the chip. And it had to go through those little pieces of electronics there, so you lost some signal. Well, the new thing that they've done over the last few years is created a chip called a BSI chip, backside illuminating chip, which was developed during the CCD days. And there was some great back illuminated CCDs, but they've done this with CMOS cameras now. So all the electronics are underneath the light-sensitive portion of the chip. And that allows all the light going in to be focused on the chip, and has raised that thing called quantum efficiency, how good they are, into the 90% level with the current generation CMOS compared to about 50% with the last generation of CCDs for aperture astronomy. So that is a huge improvement. That means they're much, much more sensitive. And that's kind of how they work. So I first got involved with CMOS here at the Texas Star Party in 2019. I was thinking about getting one of these cameras, and I just had gotten a new telescope, and I had my an older CCD camera, and I walked around on the upper field, and I was talking to people that had CMOS cameras, and most of them were young kids at the time. And the reason was the cameras were very inexpensive. They couldn't necessarily afford $8,000 for a CCD. They could buy a $1,200 CMOS camera, stick it on the back of their scope. So the young generation were the kind of the pioneers to get these cameras going and producing some really good astronomical images with them. Most of the folks I talk to love the low read noise of these cameras. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Read noise is everything in this game. Higher the read noise, the less you really can see and the more grainier images. And CMOS cameras have super, super low read noise. But you had other things going on. Some of the cameras then had amp glow, which was like this, something only DSLRs had it too. After you took an image at night, like long exposure, you'd see this glow in the corner of the image. Well, that was produced by those little amplifiers that are in your pixel. Well, that has been solved, that's gone. So, but those were some of the concerns that folks had, and I just happened to attend the Advanced Imaging Conference in San Jose that year, 2019. It was later in the year, and QHY introduced this camera called the QHY 600. And I listened to their presentation, and the specs on this camera were better than anything I've ever seen with any of the CCD cameras I've had a chance to use. Quantum efficiency was up around 90%. The read noise using what's called high gain was down around 1.5 electrons. And the dark current was 10 times less than any CCD camera. So anyways, I was really interested about that. I was like, I couldn't believe it. And recently, just after that, ZWO announced their SI6200, which is the camera I ended up buying. This is basically the same chip. The electronics were a little different. It was a little bit less expensive than the 600. It had a few less features, But it was basically the same camera, the same type of electronics. So I looked at it on the user forums, and somehow I had to come up with an excuse to my wife for why I should buy and spend money to buy the camera. And that worked. And so I got one of these cameras in July of 2020, put a bunch of filters in it, and off we went. And I did a lot of testing stuff and so forth. So this is a graph or a table that shows how the IMX 455, which is in this particular camera, compares against some of the CCDs that are out there. and I included the last generation of CCDs, the 16200. So this camera has very small pixels, but the quantum efficiency is much better. It has a very low read noise. It has very good well depth, which well depth is how many electrons can each one of those pixels hold, or how many photons they can turn into electrons can they hold. And it was very, very comparable. The difference was it was much more sensitive, and the read noise was super, super low. So, and of course the dark layer, which is comes from that, the heat was like 10 times less than a CCD camera. So, and less expensive. So it was a good deal. So, if you get one of these cameras, these new CMOS cameras, and you get into imaging, there are things that you have to do. And if you don't do these things, you can just plug it in and take some pictures, see how it comes out. If you want to determine how well your camera works and is it working up to the specs that the manufacturer says it does, you have to characterize your system. It's fairly a simple process. You take 2 flat frames, 2 dark frames, and 2 bias frames, and then you run it through a script. Say, I know PixInsight has a script for it. You can Google characterizing a CCD camera. You can find a bunch of different ways to do it. They all come up with the same number, but it's something that has to be done because you need to know a couple things when you try to figure out what your exposure time is going to be. You need to know what your read noise is of your camera. And if it's a CCD, you should be able to go to the manufacturer, or you can figure it out yourself. I'm doing it this way. You need to know what your sky is like. You need to know what your well depth of your camera is. So you need to know a few of these numbers in order to put them into this little tiny equation I'm going to show you here in a minute and figure this out. So I characterize mine. This is just a dark frame, which is a kind of a thermal frame from a camera. There's no glow. If you notice on the side, say the right or left side, there's no real light glow sticking out. So the amp glow was basically gone, and that's one of the things that the manufacturers are very successful at doing. The camera linearity. How linear is the camera? If I take longer and longer exposures, does something go wonky? And with these new cameras, they are extremely, extremely linear. This process can be done using several methods. I use the ESO method, American Association of Vertical Star Observer method, because they have their own method and they use these cameras to do photometry with. And I used their method and it came out a perfectly straight line. It was really, really good. I also sent my data to a gentleman named Adam Blocks, and you know him. He's a world-renowned astrophotographer. He teaches lots of courses, lots of videos online. So he has custom software that he ran it through, and in the end it came back be that upper left graph. Yes, it's a really linear camera. But it did have a little issue in the second panel down on the left. In the really, really super low levels, it's a little wonky. So, but it's really nothing that affects anything you do when you image unless you're going after stuff that is like super, super, super faint. So, all those tests were good, and I would expect you to see the same thing with any of the new cameras that are out right now, from the 2 most popular, the QH-wire and the ZWO cameras. They have really, really good electronics, and they've done a really good job at putting these cameras together. So the other thing, you have to take a couple flats frames, and flat frames just basically show the illumination through your telescope system. In system, I mean telescope camera, maybe you have a field flattener or a corrector in there. And it also shows you where these things called dust motes are on there. And it's a way to, when you calibrate images, it gets rid of a lot of other issues, right, with your system. So with CCDs, when we used to take these things called flat frames, if you dimmed your camera, meaning instead of exposing with a single pixel, now you make it 4 pixels, and it's called 2x2 binning, make a super pixel, and take an image a lot more sensitive. With the CCD, it's like 4 times more sensitive when you bin it. With the CMOS, that's not the case, and I didn't realize that, so this one threw me for a loop. These are 2 images. The one on the left was taken with what's called 2x2 binning, making that super pixel. I expected a much brighter image. Well, it didn't happen. The other one on the right is the 1x1 original shot, and they both have the same value, and I'm like, I can't figure out what's going on here. So I got a hold of my friend, good friend Richard Wright, which I think is here. I don't know if he's here tonight, but he's here at the Star Party. And he got a hold of ZWO, and we found that ZWO averaged these pixels instead of the way CCDs work. CCDs usually add them together. ZWO averaged them. So that was good, but I just didn't expect that. So if you're a person that uses a CCD and you're going to buy a CMOS camera, be prepared for this. If you get a QH wide camera, you have the option of either adding or averaging. ZWO just does the averaging, but it makes no difference in the world. It's just another way to manipulate the numbers. So what are the numbers? Well, the important things when you characterize a camera, this is a script within the program called PixInsight. There are, like I mentioned, there are other ways to do this, and you can do the research out there to find those other ways. It's readily available. The numbers that you need to know up in the upper left where I have the arrows. So in this case, the read noise is shown, the dark current is shown, and the full well capacity. And how many electrons can I stick in that chip? Well, when I went through this, the camera performed exactly like the manufacturer said. So I knew it was good to go. And I had the numbers now, so now I can figure out how much you can dispose with. So this was it's always a good feeling. If you get a camera and the numbers aren't the same, well, maybe you need to send that camera back because it should be what's listed on the website. So noise. Noise is what makes your image look like this. So maybe if you took a picture with your camera outside at night, maybe you get a really grainy image back, right? That looks like this. Well, what happens if the noise goes down? And as astrophotographers, the general rule of thumb is you want about 5% noise, at least 5% read noise compared to all the other sources of noise. This is a lot higher than that. This is probably 20-30%. But as you get less noise in the image, let's watch what happens here. So now the noise has gone down, it's gone down even more, it's gone down even more, and oh look, these really faint things are starting to show up. And things are getting more and more sharp. And read noise goes down, and wow, now so this is what 5% noise looks like. And this is read noise compared to all the other noise in your system. And now we can see a real tiny, say a little tiny red blob there, maybe that's a little star. And we can see this cool grid pattern on the side. Well, that's low noise, and that's what we should shoot for. So as you can see, noise, if you have a lot of noise, you have no detail, right? The detail's gone. And if you get into really, really low noise, you get the detail back. And that's what it looks like when you have really low noise levels. Actually, that's the last one. So that's what you should strive for. And the reason why we can do this now is because of the advent of these very super low read noise cameras. My CCD was about like this. And I've used 4 or 5 different types of CCDs and so forth. But this is about the noise level they produced. This is more like what you get now with these really low noise cameras. So let's talk a little bit about noise, and I'm going to apologize up front. I'm going to have to throw a couple equations up here, but for you astro imagers, this is stuff that you're going to want to know and remember. So there's a few definitions, and I'm not going to go through every one, but that's what they mean. So the 2 types of noise that we have to deal with is read noise and shot noise. So that's what they are. The read noise is the random problems we get with our analog to digital converter in the camera, and shot noise is because these photons we get from the sky arrive randomly. And maybe I'm in a bright sky and I get less of the photons I want and more of the photons I don't want. Or maybe I'm here at TSP and I have a really dark sky, but those photons are still coming in very randomly. So it depends on this value called sky flux. And sky flux is just a cool way to say maybe how much light pollution is in the sky, right? That's probably an easier way to say it. So those are the 3 little things. You don't have to write them down because I'm sure you can get this at a later date and you can see it because it's being recorded. You can also see it on the Astro Imaging channel on the AIC website. There's 3 little equations up there that basically explain what noise is all about and how to figure out what the noise is in each image. But we need to know a couple things. The equation that's down there R, the R squared. That's our read noise. So we figured that out, right, when we did that little camera test to figure out what our camera was really like. We figured out what that R was. We know how long our total imaging time or our sub-exposure length typically is. We know how many subframes we took, which is how many images we took with that, say, filter. We know the read noise. Now we need to know, what is this shot noise? How do we figure out the sky flux? So there's a cool way to do it. There is Dr. Robin Glover, who was the developer of SharpCap. Anybody in here use SharpCap? Yeah, he is a really, really sharp individual. He developed this little application. It's the one on the right-hand side. It's an online app that allows you to figure out the sky flux wherever you are. It works absolutely perfectly. And I believe it's tools.sharpcap.co.uk. Yeah, so there's the link up there for that. You can also do this using like PixInsight or maybe other applications that are for imaging can provide you with this information also. So there's more than one way, but that's the easiest way to do it. And you can do this at home before you even go someplace, which is the cool thing, because you can figure all this stuff out before you even show up here at a star party or something. You need to know how bright the sky is, maybe, or you can just say, hey, what's my Bortle level? You put that value in there. You need to know the F ratio of your telescope. You need to know your pixel size, which isn't hard to figure out. You should know what that is. You can go to the manufacturer website. You need to know how efficient that camera is, the quantum efficiency. Remember that other value I was talking about? How sensitive is the camera? You can get that from the manufacturer. And you need to know what filter you're using. And you put those numbers in, and boom, it comes out with a number at the bottom. And in this case, it says 0.19. That's electrons per pixel per second that's coming down from the sky. And this is a typical, yeah, this is a dark site like here, maybe a 21.5 sky. So you have that number, and it's an easy way to get it. You just go to the online app and do it. Well, once you have that number, you have this little formula, and if there's anything you remember, for those of you that are interested, remember that little formula right there. That is the whole key behind this. This value, C times R squared over P. R is read noise. We know what that is, right? P is this sky flux that we're getting from the sky. We just got that from that little online app, right? And then we have a value called C. C relates to how much noise you are willing to accept when you take your images. I mentioned 5% is the typical value. Well, C is equal to 10 at 5%. So now I got all three numbers. I take that 10 times whatever the read noise is divided by that other value I got, and that gives you an exposure time. And it works perfectly all the time. And it's, you can, you're using the online app, you can plan this before you even go someplace. So if you take away anything from this, remember that little, that way of doing it. And this was developed by Dr. Glover, and I've tested it over and over and over again against other methods, and it comes up with the exact same answer compared to other ways. And there are other ways to do this, but this is a very, very simple way. And you came all the way to Texas just to hear that. So there is another way which is really, really good. It's produced by the Gibraltar Astronomical Society. It's called a sub-exposure calculator. You can find it online. It'll download to your computer as sort of a workable PDF type file, and you put in basically the same numbers. You need to know your read noise. You need to know the dark current of your camera, which you got from that test that you did. You need to know a little bit about your background. What values you get in the background, which you can get from that online calculator, and you plug the numbers in, and it comes up with basically the same answer. This thing was developed years ago, and it's amazing that it came up with the same stuff. This was done by, if anybody knows Steve Canistra, he's from the Boston area. He did a lot of work on this with those folks, and they did a great job. Bottom line, math is math, and
You do math one way, you do math the other way, you come up with the same answer. So this is just another way to do it. If you're interested to check that out, you can. So here's a little example I'm going to go through. This is a KAF 16200. This was the last CCD that was really put out there for us astrophotographers. The camera averages about 50% quantum efficiency, so it's has 6 micron pixels, and typically what we want to get down to about 5% read noise, compared to 5%, our read noise 5% of our total noise in an image. And we're going to do this, we're going to calculate that sky flux using this SharpCap way, using that little online calculator I showed. So, say we took a 60-second exposure, and the background sky flux happened to be this value here of 0.71 electrons per second. So our total sky flux is our time, 60 seconds times that. It's this value, 42.6 electrons per pixel. And now I go into those equations again. This thing called single frame photon shot noise is that equation there. If you plug the numbers in, that's what you get, 6.53 electrons per pixel. So our idea is, how much read noise did we add into the total shot noise of that image? Well, it ends up, you can run that other little equation I had, plug some numbers into it that you already have, and you come up with this value of 3.04 electrons per pixel. So what percentage of read noise was added to this thing called photon shot noise? And in this case, it's 32%. I don't want 32%. I want 5%. 32% was that grainy image that I showed you earlier. I want the nice smooth one. So, but that, remember, this is a very short exposure. This is a 60-second exposure. So if I wanted to get down to 5%, I'd have to shoot with this camera for 690 seconds in a place like here where it's really dark, using that particular. So that's a little over 10 minutes. And that's exactly what I used to have to do. About 10-minute exposures when I was here with a CCD camera. It worked out great. Well, the numbers don't lie, and they say, yeah, that's what you should have been doing. Well, this is the latest generation CCD, and it's all because this camera has higher read noise. That's why you have to shoot for a longer time. If we look at an example, this is the IMX 455 chip, and we're going to do the exact same thing with the exact same numbers. I'm going to shoot for 60 seconds. My sky flux is a little bit different, but that's the value. I'm going to go run it through these equations, and in 60 seconds, sorry, there we go. Oh, darn it. So in the end, in 60 seconds, I got down, the percentage of read noise, which is added to the total noise, was 5%. So now I'm in that smooth-looking image area with only a 60-second exposure. And the reason is because this camera has read noise that is super, super low, down in the 1 to 3 electron range versus 8 to 15 electrons with a CCD. It's all about read noise, and maybe that's what I should have named the presentation. It's all about read noise. So that's a benefit to using one of these new cameras. This is just a little spread. I put some numbers in a spreadsheet. If you had an f6 scope, a lot of people do, you're in a Bortle 5 suburban sky, how long do you need to shoot for to get this low noise stuff? Well, down here in yellow at the bottom, you need to shoot for 8 seconds. That's all. People say, it'd be 8 seconds. That's not enough time. You need to shoot for 8 seconds. You need to shoot for 90 seconds if you have that CCD that I just talked about. If you're here in a Bortle 1 sky, like maybe here in Fort Davis, you have to shoot for 53 seconds, so about a 60-second exposure with the CMOS camera. With the CCD, 598 seconds, so 10 minutes. And that was typically what we always did when we came to places like this. We shot for 10 minutes. So that's just to show you, don't worry about the stuff other than it's there to show you the difference between the two cameras and how read noise affects how long you need to shoot for. So here, 6 seconds. With the older technology cameras, about 10 minutes. Now narrowband's a little bit different. Narrowband filters, depending upon the bandwidth of the filter, like an HA filter, hydrogen alpha filter, or a oxygen 3 filter, and you imagers know what I'm talking about there. yeah, you got to shoot longer, and you may have to shoot for up to 20 minutes. But in the past, with an older camera, you never got that low read noise with those band filters. Now you can with these new cameras. This basically shows you if I shot an image or I shot an exposure, how long would my exposures need to be before I got to the point where if I shot any longer, it would make zero difference in the end result of what I got. With a CCD in a suburban sky using an f7 telescope, about 4 minutes. Okay, after 4 minutes, there's no reason to shoot any longer. Nothing's going to get any better. With the CMOS camera, or at least with the IMX 455 camera, which is very similar to all the other ones that are out there, it's just your chip, you get no benefit after 60 seconds. So, would you rather shoot for 60 seconds or 240 seconds? Can your mount track well for 60 seconds? How about, can it track well for 5 minutes? And have nice round stars? Maybe not. This was just a comparison I did at home between one of my old CCDs and the new camera. Basically, it was I had to shoot with the old camera to get down to that 5% read noise level at 340 seconds out of my house, which is a brighter sky, light polluted. But with the new camera, it was like 80 seconds. That was it. So much more efficient. So lastly, now I'll talk a little bit about dark frames, and these are those frames you use to calibrate your camera, and there's a lot of discussion about whether you need to take darks or not take darks. When you image, with the new CMOS cameras that are backside illuminated, here's an example on the left of a single 3-minute subframe that was only calibrated with what's called a bias frame, which is just a frame to show just the noise. It's a 0-second exposure, or as low as you can get. And with these cameras, it's not necessarily 0, but it's like microseconds long. And then on the other side is an image that was calibrated with a real dark frame, which got rid of the thermal noise and everything. Well, you can hardly see the difference between the two. Can anybody tell which one is better than the other? They're both exactly the same, and the noise level is exactly the same in both of them. Here's a stack. This is like a stack of 3-minute. This is 30 3-minute subframes stacked together, so 90 minutes of exposure time on the left. That was calibrated with just this noise frame called a bias frame. Then on the right is, but they've been calibrated the normal way that these science cameras are calibrated, with dark frames and everything else. And there is hardly any difference at all. So, if you use one of these cameras, you can probably get by with not using dark frames if you don't want to, but you need to test it. You need to, convince yourself that it's actually true. And your camera could be a little bit different than my camera, but with mine, I don't necessarily have to. Now, if I really want to get something that's super, super faint, well, I'm just going to do it the normal way. But this is just to show you that these new cameras are very, very low noise, and they're very good at keeping everything that you see in there is actually is real stuff, not the stuff that makes an image grainy. Okay, so binning. This was just about binning. What I will tell you is, people that have one of these, they talk about gain. What gain should I set my camera at? Well, this graph here shows you what happens when these cameras go from low gain to what's called high conversion gain. High conversion gain on the bottom graph, the third step out, happens when you change the gain to this, in the ZWO case, to gain 100. The read noise drops like a rock. That is the point you want to use your camera at, this low gain conversion point. If you have a QHY camera, it's going to be a different value at a slightly different spot, but it's going to be there. Some people say, well, if I do that, I'm going to saturate everything. Not if you use the right exposure time, you won't. So, I've been able to prove that over and over again. So look for this thing called high conversion gain, and in this case, the read noise drops way down to about an electron and a half. So here's some things from the manufacturers that what they recommend. The only time I think I would say don't use high gain is maybe if you're shooting something really super bright like M42 or something, and you want to you don't want to, you want to preserve everything that's in the core of that thing. Then you may want to mix and match a little bit, but 99% of all my imaging is done using high conversion gain. So what about short exposure imaging? Well, this is a pretty good example. This is an example of a galaxy called NGC 4395. It's in Canes Venatici. It's a 10th magnitude low surface brightness galaxy. This is a 2-hour exposure, 2 hours of LRGB, luminance, red, green, blue, and then I added some hydrogen alpha to show the emission regions a little bit. This was done using high gain on the camera. It was binned 2x2. I had a read noise of about 3 electrons with this. I took a bunch of exposures that were 60 seconds long using an f8 telescope. This was in a dark site in Florida where it wasn't as dark as here, but it was about 21.6, 21.8. I basically took a bunch of 60-second exposures and put them together, and this was the result. And I'm thinking, man, 60 seconds, I don't have to guide, I don't have to, the mount tracks perfectly. I get nice sharp stars. The seeing doesn't necessarily mess it up as much, or little mount variations don't mess it up. I ended up with 400 subframes, and the issue doing something like this is not the camera, it's the computer you have. If you buy one of these new high-tech cameras, you better be ready to upgrade your computer. If you're stuck with Windows 7 on a Pentium 2, it's just not going to work. So, but you get a really super good result. So this is, this was really interesting. Here's 60 seconds of hydrogen alpha. Has anybody taken 60-second HA exposures before if you're an imager? So on the left is 180 60-second exposures. On the right is 9 20-minute exposures, which is my typical exposure time that I shoot HA in. Can you see a difference between those images? Much different. The only difference is in really the super faint levels. Oh yeah, well I can't move it's too big. It's your fault. You put the screen up, so. But in the end, when you look at these, there's almost no difference except in the really low levels. That's amazing, and the only reason this is even possible now is because of the low, what? Read noise of these new cameras. Q. So, in the future, well, here's the final result of that image, and again, no exposure was longer than 60 seconds here. I could have gone even shorter. So now that I'm here at the Texas Star Party, if we have a beautiful night, guess how long I'm going to shoot most of my exposures, at least in red, green, and blue? 60 seconds. I don't need to go any longer. And I don't need to guide. I don't need to basically do anything. It'll just track just fine. So some people said, yeah, it couldn't be done, but it can be done. And my friend Richard Wright and I, we tested this down at his place where he images in Florida, and he was doing his own thing with the short exposures. And I said, yeah, I'll do the same test that you're doing. And sure enough, it worked really, really well. So he was absolutely right. He kind of gave me the idea of this, and turned out really well. So the takeaways of all this, back illuminated CMOS performance is definitely, hands down, better than any CCD that you could have purchased as an amateur a few years back. There's much lower read noise, 3 to 10 times lower, much higher quantum efficiency, and excellent, how many electrons can I fit in that pixel? They do have small pixels, so they are more suited to moderate sized instruments, but if you have a bigger aperture scope, you surely can bin that to those pixels with good results. Maybe you do have to use darks, maybe not. I'm thinking that you can get by without using them if you don't want to. The quantum efficiency maximum is up around 90% in these new cameras, so they're much more sensitive. And some scientific CMOS cameras now are up to 95% QE. So the last takeaway is you can use very, very short exposures using that method I showed you, C times R squared over P. And you can get really, really super nice images by taking a bunch of subframes and putting them together. So, yeah, that's the bottom line. So, this was some stuff that Richard was going to do, and he published this in Sky and Telescope, as the read noise even gets lower, and it will get lower, it won't be very, very long, it'll be below 1 electron, and as the quantum efficiency gets better and better, and it will, to 100%, the future of astroimaging is going to be similar to the way planetary imagers do it now. Very, very short, quick, super short exposures. You're going to take 10,000 of them a night. Your computer's going to automatically stack them together and output at the end a really nice image. And you know, you can mark Richard and our word that you wait 5 to 10 years, you'll be doing it like that. It's getting that good. So you may need a 3 petabyte drive pretty soon to hold all these things. However, I've got a 17 terabyte drive at home that I put my images on. There was nothing like that available 5 years ago, you know. Maybe they were just starting to come out with those, but I'd have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars. So now I go spend $100 and I got a 17 terabyte drive, you know. So a petabyte drive, they're out there, but it's going to be a thing that everybody's going to use here soon. So all those images you take in the future, it's not going to be a problem for you to store them. The other issue is overhead and duty cycle. You know, even though we take an exposure, there's a little bit of a time lapse between when it takes and it downloads to your computer. Once we figure that overhead out, and it'll happen, and the cameras will be faster. It'll be much more reasonable to do that. You know, thousands and thousands of exposures, getting a nice galaxy image. And then AI. AI is a thing here, and AI and noise reduction algorithms are really going to come into light and really help us do a lot of the auto things that we have to manually do now. Right now we have some great AI apps that get rid of a lot of noise in our images. And in the future, it'll be doing a lot more. So if you wanted to look up some references of where I got all this information from, that's it there. If you haven't seen, if you're an imager and you want to read more about noise or look up Dr. Robin Glover on, just Google him. He's got a wonderful YouTube video out there that shows you this whole process of how to figure out your exposure time, and it works 100% of the time. So thanks for that, and I will leave it here. If there's any questions from anybody, I'd be happy to answer them before I move on to the next little thing. So, yes, sir. Yeah, so his question had to do with dithering. Dithering is a way to get rid of random hot pixels and stuff in your images. You know, you take an image and then you shift the whole telescope over a couple pixels, take an image, shift it back, maybe shift it that way. I do dither. Even though you're not guiding, I can still set up auto dithering. So with no guiding, it'll still move back and forth, up and down. And dithering is something, yes, you want to do. It's one of the basic fundamentals of getting, you know, the noise level down in your image, especially when you stack them. Yep. Thank you. Okay, yeah, your question was about the scripts I talked about in PixInsight. There is a camera characterization script called, I think it's Basic CCD, and it's already there. It's available within the basic program under the scripts. Computes those numbers for you if you give it a couple pieces of information, the 2 dark frames, the 2 flat frames, and the 2 bias frames. My recommendation, if you use that, and it's there, you don't have to buy it, it's nothing extra. Make sure you take your dark frames, your 2 dark frames, make one very short, like 60 seconds, make one longer, like 10 minutes. And then I'll figure out your thermal noise. But yes, it's already available there. And if you use something like CCD Autopilot has an auto way of doing this also. If you're a CCD Autopilot person, probably ACP, which is a very good automation program, it's there too. So, anybody else? Okay, yes, sir. Well, it depends on the sky you're in. The 60-second thing had to do with my system, my camera, my telescope. You may come up with a different value with yours when you come up with the exposure times, but what happens if I expose longer? I don't want to expose for 60 seconds. I want to expose for 5 minutes. Well, it's not going to ruin my image, but there will be a point. If you remember, there was one graph I showed, there was a value above. If you expose longer than that, it's not going to help you out at all. That was in a suburban sky. In a dark sky like here, it's going to be a longer value. So just off the top of my head, I'm thinking probably 4 to 5 minutes would be probably the upper limit I would ever shoot with that highly sensitive low noise camera in a sky like this. If I can go longer, there's nothing wrong. I don't want so many subframes to stack. I can shoot longer, but it's not doing anything to help me in my final result of noise. There is an upper value, and you have to compute it for each sky that you're in. That example I showed you, that 60-second example, was for a suburban sky using that particular telescope. I think it was an f6 scope. So, yeah, in the end, you're still doing the total integration. So say I want to take exposures for 5 hours, all right? Is it 5 hours of 60-second exposures, or is it 5 hours of 3-minute exposures? Yeah, my computer is not fast. I haven't upgraded it. I can't handle hundreds and hundreds of subframes. Well, then, yeah, sure, go ahead and shoot for 4 minutes or 5 minutes. But some people don't have a mount that can track very good like that. Some people just get into the hobby, you know, can't spend $15,000 or $20,000 on a mount, but they can polar line it well, and it'll track well for 30 or 60 seconds. Well, they can still do wonderful stuff, you know, just following a few of these tips on figuring out what exposure time you should have. Most of these folks probably have a small little 80 millimeter telescope. It's probably around f6, and they can get by with these super short exposure times, and it's all the real end result is because we have these cool cameras now that have this low read noise that you can do this. But to answer your question, it's not going to hurt you to shoot longer at all. You're just not going to, there will be an upper limit that you're just not going to get any benefit from it, though. But you can shoot there. I mean, it's up to you. You know, I try to be as efficient as possible when I do what I'm doing, and this method of computing exposure times is very super efficient. I may take longer subframe or more subframes, but you know, I've upgraded my computers and stuff, so they're pretty quick. I got a lot of storage, you know, and I typically put together 200 to 300 subframes on a 20 or 30 hour image. But it works fine. It's okay. It may take a few hours to process it, you know, to calibrate those, but I just get up and walk away, and I come back in an hour to see if it's done. Does that sort of answer your question, I hope? Okay, great.
John, we had a few questions over here.
Sure.
I was wondering if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. The place you live, maybe it's a suburban sky. You're going to come up with a pretty short exposure time. And here a little bit longer, but if you use those times, you're probably not going to blow out much unless it's a specific object that is very, very bright, like M42. And if you get to that case, all I would do is just take a bunch of subframes with a shorter exposure time and then blend them back together. But typically, I don't find this to be a problem at all. And over here, there was a question. Yeah. So yeah. So this is a question about gain. What should I set my gain at? You need to go to the QHY website, look at their graphs of gain, and you want to find the point where that gain, or where that read noise goes, boom, like that down. That's the high conversion gain point. On my camera, it's called gain 100. On a QHY camera, it could be something like gain 85. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I know other people that use the camera, and that stuff's available. I mean, you just look at the graph, just see where it dumps down, and just put the gain there. Yeah, I don't know how it works on them. You're going to have to ask the QHY folks. But I just know you want to shoot at that high conversion gain point. That's the most efficient place to be. It does take a while, but new stuff is efficient. So I'd recommend if you buy a new camera, upgrade your computer too. It'd be just like if you buy a new car, you know, and you want to use CarPlay when you're driving, you're not going to use your old flip phone, right? So I have one more presentation to give you guys really quick, and this is just one that I came up with about a month ago at a different star party, and it is called help amateurs helping professionals. So recently, I don't typically shoot images anymore of most of the popular stuff that's out there. I've done all that, and I surely understand, because I used to do all that, and I understand if you're new into astroimaging, yeah, you want to shoot this and all the nice bright objects. But I've done all that, so I wanted something to challenge me a little bit. And I got into shooting these really faint things that are possible planetary nebula, maybe not, maybe they are. But there are things that people had never seen before. No images had ever been taken. And this was the first one I did. This was actually an image that people have imaged this before, but there's only one other that I know of, and it came out of Chile. This is called FR225. FR means Frew, Dr. David Frew. He was the guy that discovered this. It also goes by the designation of ALV-KN1. This is in the winter sky in Monoceros. This is a super, super, super faint object. And I said, man, I need to try this out. I want a challenge, something to keep my brain going. So I did, and this was the image I got from it, and I put it together. The green blue is the oxygen 3 that was in this object. And it's very super faint. You can see a little bit of hydrogen alpha red up. Whoop, I guess we're working again. You can see a little bit of hydrogen alpha red up in the corner. And here's what the HA and O3 frames look like. So I thought, man, that was pretty cool. What else can I do? I just happened to find this by searching around the internet one night, and it just popped in there. And I thought, shoot, I'll try it. Well, this is an object of what's called, it's a possible planetary, is a very faint planetary nebula in Cygnus called Patrick 5, PA5. It's in Cygnus. This is a 24-hour exposure. This is basically the first image you will see of it because no one else has shot it before. And I was like, wow, I could actually get something that no one has taken an image of before. And there it is. There's Patrick 5. Well, then at the El Dorado Star Party a year and a half, 2 years ago now, I gave a presentation. This was in 2021, and I talked about this object here, FR230. Dr. David Frew discovered this, and it's in Andromeda, and I took an exposure of 33 hours I spent on it. And it's, again, the first color image that is anywhere out there on this object. No one knew what it looked like. But I found the object on a list I was sent from some guys that work on these really faint things, and they said, give it a try, see what you get. Well, there it is. And I presented this originally at the El Dorado Star Party. This was the first time the image had ever been seen. No one had ever shot this before. Well, earlier this year, I was contacted by a gentleman named Dr. Howard Bond at the University of Pennsylvania. Penn State. He's in the Department of Astrophysics, and he has discovered other objects himself. If anybody knows about the planetary nebula EGB6, the B is Bond. That's his name. So he discovered that object, and he said, hey, I just saw your image of this thing. We took some professional spectra about this. We are writing a paper. We would like you to be one of our co-authors of this paper, professional astronomy paper. And I was like, you got to be kidding me, really? But no one had shot this before. This was the first. This was better than any image he had ever seen of it. They had done some stuff with professional telescopes, but they had never gotten deep enough to really see what it looked like. And there you go. That's what it looks like. And this was the paper that I think is out there now. Here I am, a lonely amateur astro imager that sits lonely at a computer. It's not a social thing. And here's something that the professionals were interested about, and they're like, yeah, can we use your image? This is really neat. So just because you're sitting at your telescope taking a picture of something, challenge yourself. There are people that want to use your data, and you just have to spend a little time at it. Now, fortunately, I do a lot of my stuff at home. This was taken from my Boreal 5 light-polluted suburban sky. But I've had plenty of time when I'm home, right? I don't have to drive 1,000 miles to here. I can just walk out, turn my power on, start my thing. So I spent a lot of nights on it. And I was like flabbergasted when he got a hold of me and said, hey, I want to use your image. Well, what else has been done? Well, here's an image of FR223 in Perseus. That's the first image you'll see of this object. No one has imaged it before. You can do this. You spend a little bit of time. Yeah, I put 46 hours into it, but it was pretty cool. Here's another one called Patrick Strotner Dressler 6. This is the first deep image of that. And people have grabbed that stuff and thrown it out there. Yes, sir. It's a 6-inch refractor with that ASI 6200 camera. Yeah. Here's another one. This one got into a calendar. This one's kind of cool. It's called Strotner Dressler 44, STDR 44. I got to name this because I was the first person ever to shoot an image of this, and they said, well, what are we going to call it? You need to give it a name because no one has ever shot this before. And I decided to call it the Heart in Monoceros because it looks like a heart. There it is on the left, kind of shaped like a heart. And as a bonus in that image, there was this other planetary nebula that was considered just a possible. They upgraded that image, that planetary nebula, the professionals did, to a real planetary nebula after seeing my image. So there's another example of how me, the lonely amateur guy at my telescope, can help the professionals figure things out. And here's another one. This one's called, this got a long name, and I will explain. The letters are based on the individuals that discovered the object. So in this case, PA means Dana Patrick, RAS is Sabkib Rasul, Mommy are two Indian amateur astronomers, and then they give it a number designation. So those 4 people discovered this object, and that's how all these things were kind of named. This one's got a nice green round halo to it, and it's probably a potential planetary nebula. We don't know yet, but the amateurs will see stuff like, the professionals will see these, and then they take professional spectra at a, you know, like Kitt Peak or another professional observatory, and they can get the real idea of what it is. But this kind of gets them jump started, you know, going when you do stuff like this. This was 35 hours. This was last June. Here is my latest one. This one it's called J637. This was discovered by Dana Patrick. No one had shot this before. I have some friends in Europe that suggested I see what I could find in this location. And the guy that discovered it, his birthday happened to be just a few months ago. And I spent about 40 hours on this, and we presented this image to him as part of his birthday party. But now the professionals are seeing this, and they're like, oh, we need to take professional spectra on this because it's got all the characteristics of a planetary nebula. So anyways, I just wanted to throw a few images out there that, you know, just because you're at home in your backyard, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do good things. And there are places to find these objects. There's a catalog called planetarynebula.net, and you can go in that catalog and find hundreds and hundreds of objects. And at this particular time, when I downloaded this and made a screenshot of it, there was 402 unpublished planetary nebula candidates. So those are objects that somebody discovered, but they don't know what they are. Well, you can click that, and you get a list of objects. Maybe try shooting one of them and see what you get. And this was another database that's done at Hong Kong University called HASH, Planetary Nebula Database. This is another one. So that's just a few ways that you can find that stuff if you want some objects. So that's kind of cool. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that there are ways us amateurs can help the professionals. And I just wanted to challenge myself, and it's turned into this paper, to 3 of these other objects that now they've, you know, they're trying to figure out what they really are. And it's all because I spent a little time in my backyard taking pictures. So give it a try. It may work out well for you. And I'm going to leave you guys here with a little, hopefully, video that'll kind of, just some images I've taken over the years, set to some cool music, and maybe it'll get you excited about going out tonight and shooting some stuff. So, or looking at some stuff if you're a visual observer. So, we just run this here.
Cause you're a sky full of stars. I'm gonna give you my heart.
All right, folks, if we could have another round of applause for our speaker tonight, John Talbot. John, that was a wonderful presentation. Thank you. And on behalf of the Texas Star Party, I would like to present you with this certificate of merit. Thank you very much, and we appreciate the talk. Yes, wonderful. And we're hoping that we have a great night for imaging tonight. So with that, dark out is at 9 p.m. tonight, so hopefully we'll be able to get started at that time. Have a great night, everyone.
We're very pleased to announce our new StarSense Explorer Dobsonians. The telescope tube features a larger aperture than the other StarSense Explorer telescopes. It also has a 2-inch Crayford focuser that accepts both 2-inch and 1 1/4 format eyepieces, and also has a custom pointing knob to help you precisely aim the telescope at your target. Both the tube and base have carry handles at their balance points, and of course, the exciting StarSense Explorer dock. Simply place your smartphone in the dock and launch the app. Choose from the best objects to view, then just move the telescope to follow the arrows to your target. When it's ready to view, the bullseye turns green. It's easy to do because of the patented StarSense technology.
Hi everyone, we hope you'll enjoy the presentations we're bringing to you virtually from the Texas Star Party. We wanted to thank everyone who has taken the time to make this event what it is. TSP is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and it's made possible every year by the help of people just like you. If you like these presentations and would like to help further the Star Party, you can throw a few bucks or a few thousand in our virtual tip jar by donating today. And it's tax deductible too. Make sure to share these videos with your friends, any clubs you're a part of, and most of all, remember to have fun. We hope to see you in person next year.